Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Old Romans Unscripted, to the Sunday evening edition. Well, to the Sunday edition. It's evening here in the UK, and it's lunchtime there in Chicago with Father Thomas. So, hello, Father Thomas.
Hello, Your Grace.
Cool. Now we've well, what a week it's been for current affairs and for the church. There's oodles that we could talk about today. Of course, much of it has to do with the George Floyd phenomenon, which has literally taken the world by storm, we might say. Including riots and looting. Well, I think there have been some peaceful demonstrators, but it would seem that some demonstrations have turned into riots. We were shocked yesterday here in the UK to see the demonstration in London turn into a full-scale riot around the cenotaph of all places, which during the anniversary of the Normandy landing, it was quite shocking to see riot police and protesters literally at war around the cenotaph on a weekend that, really should be full of remembrance of those who gave their lives, and I might say gave their lives without threatening others' lives, which of course has been one of the criticisms of the demonstrations, is that with the coronavirus pandemic still at large, that although some have felt compelled and arguably appreciably to march, on the other hand, it's obvious that social distancing hasn't been high on the agenda of most participants, and we only need well, probably through this coming week we'll discover whether or not the pandemic is still very much alive and well, as we will no doubt perhaps realize how many higher infection rates have become. There are already indications from the end of last week, various places here in the UK, that a trend was rising again, and we've still not really seen a perceptible or appreciable drop-off in terms of the R rate or the infection rates and the death rate, sadly. So interesting times, interesting debates and discussions online. Social media has been ablaze, literally, we might say, with various vying opinions as to the situation, and not least among even ecclesiastics. So that we've had various bishops who otherwise have been fairly quiet during the pandemic, suddenly have felt provoked to speak, and politically, we might add. So that here in England, for example, various Church of England bishops a week ago, of course, were criticising one of the Prime Minister's advisors for not observing the lockdown, when of course he had been instrumental in instituting the lockdown for the rest of the country. Various bishops took to Twitter and loudly condemned Dominic Cummings. And then in the past week, again, various of the Church of England bishops have taken to social media again to criticize President Trump, and subsequently to our own government for with Trump, the stunt outside St. John's Episcopal Church in Washington has caused quite a stir, even amongst Church of England bishops, but also too subsequently commenting on the tragic situation of George Floyd, but also then the possible suggestions of systemic and institutional racism still prevalent, particularly in criminal justice systems, both in the UK and in the US of A. As one, however, commentator noted regarding the Church of England, it was quite odd that a senior hierarchy who are predominantly white should take it upon themselves to criticize other institutions for lack of proportional representation, we might say, amongst people of color, considering that when Archbishop Sentamu of York retires today, effectively tomorrow, there will not be a single person of color in the senior diocesan hierarchy of the Church of England. Instead, there will be half a dozen coloured bishops as suffragans, as junior bishops, assistant bishops, but otherwise no diocesan bishop, no senior member of the ecclesiastical hierarchy of the Church of England. And John Sentamu, anyway, has, as it were, been holding that unique position of colour representation since 2009, when he became the sole representative. Prior to that, Nazir Ali, who was the Bishop of Rochester, when he resigned in 2004, or 2009, of course, then there were the two of them as representative proportionality of coloured people in the House of Bishops in the Church of England. That said, of course, the US of A, two notable archbishops, both uniquely connected to Washington, have expressed divergent views on the present situation and on the present political situation in the US of A. Archbishop Mario Vigano, former Papal Nuncio to the United States of America, so as it were the ambassador from the Vatican to the US of A. That's who and what a Papal Nuncio is. He has written publicly a letter to President Trump, extolling and supporting him, but at the same time, the present Archbishop of Washington, one Archbishop Gregory, on the other hand, has published a letter severely criticizing President Trump, partly in response, partly we might say jumping on the same bandwagon as everybody else concerning the photo opportunity at St. John's Episcopal Church, but then too loudly decrying an otherwise pre-planned visit by the Trumps to the National Shrine of St. John Paul II, which Archbishop Gregory has decried, conflating really the situation at St. John's Episcopal Church with the visit to the National Shrine. And yet actually the two really are quite two different incidences. But what Archbishop Gregory has done is, of course, to conflate those and to severely criticize President Trump. So lots there for us to sink our teeth into. Father Tom, what are your opening remarks or your initial thoughts?
Well, it's quite interesting, and that this prelate in Washington, D.C., Wilton Gregory, has decided now to make a public remark. He was pretty silent for the coronavirus outbreak. He was pretty silent for everything else going on. Not really said much about the impeachment of Trump or anything else politically involved with the Trump administration. But this is where he draws his line, if you will, or nails his thesis to a door. And it's just completely absurd. Bad-mouthing the President of the United States or any person is not the job of a prelate, of a shepherd of the church. We're not, I mean, just lowering yourself to name calling and all this is just completely elementary in the sense of just childish behavior. For someone that should have the maturity level, it's well, to use one of his words, it's just completely just wrong.
Yeah, you know? I'll just give a quote here from Archbishop Gregory's statement. He writes, "I find it baffling and reprehensible that any Catholic facility would allow itself to be so egregiously misused and manipulated in a fashion that violates our religious principles, which call us to defend the rights of all people, even those with whom we might disagree." Now, it should be pointed out, of course, as I was saying before, that Archbishop Gregory has conflated two events together, namely the first event, which was a visit for a photo opportunity by the president to St. John's Episcopal Church, which, according to reports, and there are again divergent opinions here, basically President Trump was accused of having sent ahead people to disperse the crowd from the park immediately opposite the church by the use of, well, originally they were accused of using tear gas and then of rubber bullets to disperse the crowd. Now, I've read various sources. So on the one hand, the Episcopal clergy themselves, who, by the way, weren't told about the impending presidential visit, who had been on the steps of the church giving out bottles of water and providing, as it were, a refreshment stop and a safe space for protesters from the park. They, of course, complained that they were cleared away with everybody else from the pavement and the steps of their own church. And naturally, they're quite sort of upset because, A, they weren't told that there was going to be a photo op. B, the reason for the photo op was because their church had suffered, read the riots, it had suffered a small fire. And whilst otherwise, I suspect, they would have appreciated the photo opportunity. Nonetheless, on this particular occasion, they didn't like being shoved away and not being told anything about it. As I say, read the dispersal of protesters. There are various reports. The protesters themselves, many of them claiming that tear gas was used and rubber bullets were used. The officials themselves saying that lots of warnings were given. It had been advertised that the park was supposed to be, the demonstration was supposed to be over by 6 o'clock, that everyone had been told that several warnings were given to tell the people to disperse before the police went in to make way, as it were, and clear the path for the president. Now, the reason why the president was going to the church, in part, was because of the fact that it had suffered a fire due to the riots, but primarily because he had signed a new executive order elevating the importance of religious freedom and religious liberty in United States foreign policy, which on the whole, most ecclesiastics would have considered a good thing. So included within that is, for example, a requirement for White House staff and officials to receive religious freedom training so that they are fully briefed and understand the concept of religious freedom in terms of international law, which you may recall is upheld as a human right by the United Nations, by the European Union, and by various countries around the world independently in their own constitutions or as their own policies as well. But it is something, of course, that we as ecclesiastics have perceived in recent years, a gradual increase and encroachment of secularism in the public sphere is drowning out and pushing out religious perspectives and views. And so many of us would regard Trump's new executive order quite favorably. And this is what makes Archbishop Gregory's conflation of the two visits so strange, because on the one hand, one might appreciate his concern at the way the crowd from St. John's Episcopal Church were dispersed. I think most people have reservations about that. But his suggestion that the St. John Paul II National Shrine was somehow being itself used as a political scapegoat for the president, when in fact that visit had been long pre-arranged, is really, as it were, to take a stretch too far, is really quite outrageous. What's the reaction been, Father Tom, amongst Catholics in America about Archbishop Gregory's stance?
Well, for traditional Catholics, Orthodox Catholics, it's been pretty much on the same par that you and I feel. It's just the wow factor of, really, this is happening right now. A prelate is saying these things, and it's disgust. I think a lot of it's just disgust, a little bit hurt that Shepherd is doing these things, just completely conflating this already bad time we're in and just making matters worse. And then there's a lot of Catholics.
Actually,
there's a lot of Catholics, yeah. So there's a little bit of delay right now. So
yeah,
there's a lot of Catholics that are completely supporting it, and they're on board with it, and they're praising him and saying what a righteous man he is. So it's kind of divided right now, and that's not great, because when we're divided.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, I think what doesn't help is that he has conflated different events and issues into one.
Well, yeah, he's compared apples and oranges, if you will.
Yeah. He's confused the whole George Floyd scenario with St. John Paul photo op with the Bible, and then the visit to the National Shrine. So it's a and well, see, the question is, isn't it? Is this willful? Is this a deliberate conflation of these things, or not? Or is he just doesn't understand it and has put all these things together? 2 + 2 = 5.
I think he knows exactly what he's doing. I think this is a deliberate, well-informed delivery on his part. Because that's what a lot of the leftists like to do. They just mix everything together and put their own spin on it and deliver it. And whatever rubbish comes out, well, they stand by it and they double down on it. And I mean, you look at the people, the politicians that are allowed to participate at the Basilica under his officiating of religious services. And there's no hiding behind a veil with what his agenda is, his intentions, and being the Archbishop for the capital of this country. He does have a political role. That's always been known. Whoever is filling that see, whether they like it or not, it's politics. It's not so much being a shepherd for the flock. It's about being the political leader in a prelatorial role. And well, that's just completely wrong. But when I heard the first accounts about the tear gas and the rubber bullets being used, and I did my own investigation into that, and I saw the videos, and I'm like, those aren't tear gas. That's a smoke cannon, which I have seen firsthand working in EMS, smoke cannons being used, rubber bullets being used, and stuff like that from law enforcement. I know the difference. Smoke cannons are gray and clear, or like white. Tear gas is a little bit more tinged yellow, orange, or red, depending on what brand they use.
And also, various commentators have said, if it was tear gas,
they'd be crying. They'd be down on the ground.
You wouldn't be able to, sort of respond really or react, except to cave into the experience.
You're going to be in a world of hurt. You're not going to be able to run very fast. You're going to be discombobulated because it's going to do we use OC spray, tear gas, tear spray in the jail for incidents. And trust me, that is not a pleasant thing to be around. And the way the people were reacting when the smoke cannons were used to how they would have reacted with tear gas, it's completely different. So what the law enforcement did, and to clear the way for the president, they were given several warnings and all this, and you have to take that into account. That they were peaceful protesting before, and the president was showing up. So you do what every Secret Service agent does. You make sure the area where the president's going to be is secure. That's just national security. And for the fact that, so with the clergy and the steps and maybe not being warned ahead of time or given the proper chance to be part of the photo op or be, gracious hosts to the president, I'll side with them on that. Yeah, that maybe wasn't handled the best. But then again, we don't know the full story. We don't know what was going on. So all in all, speculation is never good. You just move on. You just, this happened. You say your apologies or whatever, and you move on from it. You don't conflate this situation to try to paint it in your favor when clearly you're not showing a good face right now with siding with the people that are making the situation far and far worse.
You see, and he's also, he's criticized the Knights of St. Columbus, who acted as hosts to the Trumps at the National Shrine, and he's totally ignored the fact that the visit was planned specifically for June the 2nd, as the date in 1979 when John Paul arrived for the first time in Poland as Pope, and marking the end of the Soviet Empire. And not forgetting that Mrs. Trump is an Eastern Catholic herself, is an Eastern European Catholic. So Trump has honored that papal pilgrimage before in Warsaw. And he spoke at length about St. John Paul II's homily from June the 2nd in 1979. So it's this is the visit to the National Shrine was not a photo opportunity regarding anything to do with the then present climate, political climate, as it were. That was just something that had been prepared, pre-planned. But Archbishop Gregory has conflated the whole thing together. Now,
my question.
Go on.
My question, Archbishop Gregory, is: since when is it acceptable to admonish somebody walking into your church, walking into one of your churches? Because we know miracles can happen, and we know President Trump is far from sainthood, and we know but with having a Catholic wife, a devout Catholic wife, we know what devout women can do in the history of the church, in the conversion of their husbands and of their families and of their loved ones. So admonishing him and in a sense degrading him for spending some time before the relics, before our Lord, and time of prayer on his knees praying.
Yeah.
Most Catholics don't even get on their knees and pray anymore. And here this president's getting on, this president taking the time, showing that reverence and whatever prayer he's offering to our Lord at the time, and admonishing him from that is just wrong. And I would go even a step further, say sinful for Archbishop Gregory. And he better do a good examination of conscience for that, for these actions.
And it does seem that the Archbishop's condemnation is more personal than it is political, in the sense that he seems to object particularly to President Trump himself, rather than necessarily to the office of president.
Right.
And this is where he's kind of, again, where he's brought in this kind of conflation of his personal appreciation of Trump, and then the what would otherwise be the political and diplomatic cordiality and respect that would normally be given to the head of state.
And, if you're going to play the politics game, he's not playing it well on either side, because you may not like a person, but you need to respect their office. And that's the one thing we need to remember, is that it's one thing to criticize somebody in their state of office if they're abusing their office, if they're doing something that's immoral in their office. And now this has been brought up too. If the president of the United States is doing something immoral that's publicly known, then the Archbishop has every right, because the president's in his jurisdiction, to say something to bring attention to that, and to allow for the president or the person to make the proper amendment and repentance of their wrongdoings. But yet we don't see him admonishing the pro-abortion, baby killing politicians that are in the Capitol, the pro-anything goes politicians when it comes to lifestyles and relationships in humanity. We don't see anything him admonishing that. The only thing we see him doing is admonishing a man walking into a church to pray. That was planned to honor a pope who did great things for his home country and for Eastern Europe, but yet,
well, for the world,
and for the world, of course.
I mean, John Paul II, for all that we may have reservations about him theologically, in terms of being an international world leader, he was certainly that. More so than any of his predecessors in recent times have been. John Paul II's influence on the world stage was really quite immense. And of course, and the thing is that particularly what he did do was bring people together. Now, again, ignoring the theological stuff, but in terms of the world stage, he was great at bringing people together, at bringing reconciliation and healing between governments and nations. He did a lot for world peace. He did a lot for the progression of true freedom and liberty. Politically, for many across the world,
he was able to bring dialogue, and where so many people were fighting, he brought dialogue.
Well, that's one of the things that's always intrigued me. That President Trump, for example, was the first president of America to visit North Korea and to have a face-to-face personal discussion with the president of North Korea, and to agree a deal. Now, okay, the deal may have gone south since, but the point is that that was Trump doing something truly presidential, statesmanlike, and working for world peace. Because the last thing we want is for rogue nations like North Korea to start behaving badly. But he was criticized, so much for that. Again, because it seems to me often, to my mind, people can't separate their dislike of him personally from his role and office as president, as POTUS, and then from his political stance as a politician. And I think it's helpful, and certainly was always the case before. People understood the subtle nuanced differences in those perspectives. It's there were plenty of people who didn't like, I don't know, President Roosevelt, but he was respected in public discourse and public speech because he was president of the United States. Not everyone agreed with his politics, clearly, but he was acknowledged and recognized and respected for his office. He also, incidentally, was generally respected as a person, because as a person, he was known to be fairly, a straightforward, straight upward kind of guy. Now, with regard to President Trump, okay, on the personal level, Mr. Trump is perhaps, he's no saint. He's no saint. But he is president of the United States, so he should deserve. So the respect due to that office should still be shown. Mm-hmm. And this is, one of the things that has frustrated me over here when he has visited in a state capacity, that, the way people have responded or reacted to that has always, worried me, because it's, they're conflating, appreciation of the person with the office. And, that's we shouldn't do that. And then, of course, politically, okay, well, everyone's, got their opinions. Politically, everyone's divergent. And there may be some things about President Trump's politics that many don't appreciate. There are some things about his politics I don't appreciate. Now, from my own personal perspective, just to give an example, I'm not keen on President Trump as a person. I'm not keen on President Trump for his politics. But as POTUS, as president of the United States, I will give him the respect due to that office. And it's amazing that Archbishop Gregory, for example, will give to Nancy Pelosi the respect due to her office as Speaker, and yet says nothing in the personal sphere about her complete lapse and apostate behavior as a Catholic, and and her politics, which are completely at odds with the Catholic faith and Catholic social doctrine. So that he allows Nancy Pelosi to give an oration in the cathedral at Washington for various times for political funerals of politicians, and he will do that out of respect on the one hand for her office, but on the other hand says nothing about her disavowal of the Catholic faith, even though she claims to be a Catholic. He says nothing to contradict her on abortion or on contraception or any or anything else. And I think that's why so many traditional and Orthodox Catholics have a bit of a issue with the way Archbishop Gregory has approached this situation, because it's simply not professional. It's not the done thing for a public figure in his position. As you say, as Archbishop of Washington, he holds a position of influence and of respect itself. But here he is conflating various different issues and facts and not getting them right, and using his position to then criticize the president. It's what's the phrase? Chutzpah. It's incredible.
And to I think change and focus on a good prelate of the church now. I mean, whatever we want to talk about, Archbishop Vigano, and his praise and support in all this right now, because still we have no idea where he is, and but he's still producing letters, and he's still being a good shepherd and doing what he can to help those souls and whatever he feels entrusted to his care. Based off his letters, I still think that he has some sense of responsibility and pastoralship to the United States. He still sees himself as kind of a nuncio, emeritus, if you will, to the United States. But that's good that he's still reaching out and he's still showing the people that there's a bishop around that cares and is trying to.
So you mean he's retained the newness, the newness of the nunciature, even if he's given up the day-to-day responsibility. I mean, Archbishop Vigano is an interesting character. It has to be said, and you know, his recent pronouncements have raised not a few eyebrows, even among Orthodox Catholics, because we remember that when he was Papal Nuncio in Washington, he was no great friend to tradition. You know, he wasn't an advocate of tradition, and was you know, no great friend to traditionalists while he was a Papal Nuncio. But you know, we rejoice in the fact that subsequently, now in retirement and in hiding, he seems to have come round more to the full faith with vigor. And for those of you who perhaps haven't read his recent letter, he I thought that was a copy of it there, but it's not. He has it's really quite a strange letter.
Which letter are you talking about?
So this is the one to President Trump.
Okay.
This is the one to President Trump, and it's unusual in the sense that he kicks from the off from a theological perspective. It's almost as if he's writing a letter to I know to another committed Christian, which I think most of us find a little odd in writing to President Trump, who is not necessarily known for being Christian would be, but nonetheless, he begins from the off just with these words. For example, he says, "Mr. President, in recent months we have been witnessing the formation of two opposing sides that I would call biblical: the children of light and the children of darkness. The children of light constitute the most conspicuous part of humanity, while the children of darkness represent an absolute minority. And yet the former are the object of a sort of discrimination which places them in a situation of moral inferiority with respect to their adversaries, who often hold strategic positions in government, in politics, in the economy, and the media. In an apparently inexplicable way, the good are held hostage by the wicked and by those who help them either out of self-interest or fearfulness." Now, he's spot on. I mean, that's absolutely right. That is a Orthodox Catholic take on the present situation. But it's just a strange way of starting a letter to a president, you know, without the usual kind of diplomatic overtures, you know, the sort of cordial greetings and etc. And without the kind of secularist spin that normally, you know, these sort of letters would have, to go straight in from the off on a theological perspective and trajectory is quite unusual. But then again, this really is for somebody who was Papal Nuncio.
He would know how to properly be diplomatic.
Yeah,
you know.
So this is quite strange.
But that's one thing that, since he was a Papal Nuncio, he knows how to be diplomatic. He should know how to address properly and do the formalities. When he doesn't do that, it should raise a flag, like a bell. A light should go off saying, these are extraordinary times right now. This situation, what needs to be said, needs to be said, needs to be addressed. And Mr. President, you know, you've been known for being fairly blunt in many of your deliveries. So here I'm going to be blunt and giving you the message of truth that needs to be delivered to you for you to make the best decisions possible going forward in handling this. And I think that was his in a sense, his context in delivering that note, that letter. It's just, here's the blunt, here's the real truth. And formalities aside, respecting you as president, of course, this is what's going on.
Yeah. I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying, but it's
when the building's on fire, you don't have time for formalities. You need to put the fire out.
No, but then there are faster ways of saying what he's saying. I mean, this is not a short letter, ladies and gentlemen.
No, it's not.
This is not a short letter. I'm scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. It's not a short letter, but it's and it. Yeah, I mean, it's just very strange. It strikes me, just because of his former position, his former office, that he should write in this very sort of direct fashion, and which, by the way, you know, for the benefit of those who haven't read it, he doesn't criticize the president. His directness here is really a forthrightness in diagnosing the present political situation and context, and he's very much, as it were, on the side of generally Mr. Trump. It's one of those letters I would love to have seen. I would love to have seen President Trump reading it. Do you know what I mean? I would just
he probably had Melanie sitting next to her. Melanie, what's this word? What's this word? What's this word? What's this word? He's using these Catholic what?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I imagine, you know, probably a half dozen advisors have had to pick it apart to try and explain it to him. I doubt he even got that first paragraph, even though it is a pretty concise analysis of the present situation politically, globally. Mm-hmm. For those of you who perhaps, because I was reading it very quickly, but essentially what Archbishop Vigano is saying, and basically it sets the tone for the whole of his letter, is essentially what he's saying is that in the situation in the world today, he's saying that the crisis proportionally is on kind of biblical proportions, and he sees it and understands it as an ongoing, really, the battle between right and wrong, between good and bad, and between the children of the light and the children of darkness. Now, he says the children of light constitute the most conspicuous part of humanity, which he means by saying is that the children of light, so the majority of people in the right, light and right, nicely rhyming, are the majority of people. But he says that they are held hostage by the minority of the children of darkness. Now, the children of darkness, we would understand probably as progressives, progressives and extreme liberals or leftists, who represent, he says, the absolute minority. Now, bear with, because then he goes on to make the point that the minority, on the other hand, though, tend to hold the majority of the strategic positions in governments, in politics, in economy, and in the media, which is true. And in an apparently inexplicable way, the good are held hostage by the wicked, meaning, of course, that though the majority of people haven't lost their minds, nonetheless, we're all held hostage by the minority who have. That's basically what he's saying. And in terms of losing minds, of course, he's really referring to understanding things in a theological sense, between right and wrong, between light and darkness, etc. So it's really quite a powerful and you know, extremely good, as it were, analysis of the political situation globally. But it's just strange that he should write quite in this way, and to the president of all people.
Well, just
Now I can't find. Has there been any response from Mr. Trump himself?
nothing that I know of right now, but I just want to make one quick comparison. So we have the letter from Archbishop Vigano. So well thought out, well delivered, presented beautifully. We have a tweet or whatever he was using from Archbishop Gregory that's a few sentences, if that, or whatever. Two prelates of the church addressing the president of the United States, and see how they handled it, and see, you know, and just it. And now right there, for all our viewers, that should be a clear sign where the truth lies. You know, who's coming from the.
Yeah, to put it another way, one uses theological language and writes clearly as a Christian. The other uses secularist political language, which could have been written by anybody. You know, one is clearly from a pastor and from a bishop, and the other is not.
And you know, which one do you want leading your soul to your eternal means? I guess is, you know, the ultimate question is, you know, do we want someone, you know, bringing us to Christ, or do we want someone bringing us to the devil? And you know, these are the hard questions where people got to wake up. People got to get off their seat. This is, you know, we can't be watching the game from the sidelines anymore. You know, the call to action is now. And if you're a good, faithful Christian, Catholic, you're Orthodox, our time of enjoyment and sitting in the hammock is done and over. We got to get up and fight. We got to be church militant in the sense of fighting for our rights, fighting for the truth, defending the truth, bringing people to the love and fullness of the truth. And having someone like Archbishop Vigano leading us in a sense, you know, that's the type of prelate you need, you know, like yourself, your grace, of course. You know, I think you and him would probably get along great in all seriousness.
I don't know.
But that's the type of shepherds we need right now. You know, we need to get rid of the Gregorys and the Shupages and so on.
I mean, if to be honest, I would say that we don't need controversialists,
right?
And we don't need to conflate and confuse the faith with politics.
Exactly.
Now you see the Vigano's letter actually airs beautifully on the side of theology and the faith, and in this particular instance, as a written piece of work, is apposite and brilliantly written. But what concerns me, on the other hand, is the way that the way it's presented and portrayed in a kind of sensationalist, controversialist kind of way, which, in my observation, generally would tend to obscure the truth and the message of the letter, which is sound and very good, and instead allow it to be lost and whipped up in the frenzy of the political climate, and not allow it to be read and studied calmly and appropriately. You know, this is my problem generally with what otherwise would be good voices in the traditional and Orthodox Catholic sphere, but who tend towards this kind of controversialist presentation. which then sadly does get conflated with the chaos of the political whirlwind of the present moment, and therefore doesn't allow the truth and the good teaching contained to be properly appreciated. You know, with Archbishop Vigano, he has, you know, he's a controversial figure. On the one hand, he has exposed, and perhaps quite rightly, all sorts of problems for the Roman Church. It's difficult, though, to see. It's difficult, though, to see that many have really appreciated what he has been trying to say, because of the controversial way in which what he has said has been presented. People have, again, sort of, you know, conflated it with political currents. You know, to put it another way, Archbishop Vigano has been the voice of truth the last 2 or 3 years, trying to expose particular discrepancies in the mainstream Vatican presentation of the Church. So he has exposed serious problems regarding the Vatican Bank, regarding the sex abuse crisis, regarding Pope Francis's administration, all sorts of things. But because of the tendency, and I have to say, of right-wing American political Catholic commentators, the truth that he has tried to expose gets lost in the kind of political partisan discussion that ensues. Does that make sense? Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, it makes completely sense.
So that people who really need to know what he has said don't hear it, because it's presented in such a sensationalist and controversialist way by the real right of center, that anyone with a kind of reasonably sort of middle ground perspective will just go, "Oh, I won't bother. Won't bother reading that."
Right. It's one of those things where it's like, you know, you have to be very careful, because in the United States, we see things completely different than the rest of the world, unfortunately, and that's one of our flaws, because we have this little sugar-coated candy world, if you will, of we're the greatest or whatever like that. And then when we get something like Vigano, who presents documents and presents the truth, but then all of a sudden gets misconstrued and gets swept away into the whirlwind of the political world, now we start seeing, well, the left aren't going to read him, isn't going to read it at all because he's too right. And then the right's going to hijack it and take it for, you know, maybe out of context of what it's really meant to be. And then you have us, where I consider us to be more right mid-center, in the sense where we see the truth, we see the message, we see what the objective points are that he's trying to get across. And we're like, okay, great. But then trying to get other people involved into that and understanding that and carrying it out, that's just, you know, the uphill battle we face, because so many people are still, you know, in a sense, papists. They still have this idea that the Pope can do no wrong. And, you know, Vigano came from that, you know, and then he was able to get in the cracks and underneath the rug and find all these negative, bad things going on and bring them to light, bring the truth to light, you know, and try to let the church clean house.
But again, you see, with Vigano is you know, he was the establishment man. He was the institutional man. He was the corporate man throughout his career. You know, he did not rock the boat, and that's why he progressed careerized ecclesiastically through the ranks, etc., to become Papal Nuncio. Now, something clearly went wrong, because all of a sudden he became out of favor. And the trouble is that now you see he's always presented, particularly by the Vatican, he's always portrayed as being on the outside, and you know, therefore, you know, don't pay any heed. Whereas many of us remember that actually, hold on a minute, he was the papal guy. He was the guy who always gave the papal line. And like I said before, you know, he was no friend of traditionalists back in the day as nuncio. But so whereas he's what he has to say now should have clout, exactly because he was the establishment man before, and that's why he knows where the holes and where the skeletons are buried. Unfortunately, that gets lost. That impact gets lost because of the political whirlwind that goes on around these things. And as you say, so, you know, various Catholics, particularly on the left, just will not read him now because of this, you know, controversial presentation that's gone around him. And that's a shame, because, you know, he is generally, you know, speaking the truth. And if anything that should underscore, underline that point, is the fact that he is in hiding.
Right. And, you know, it's one thing, whatever you want to say about how he came to see the light, if you will. And I think one of his first letters, when he first, you know, blew the whistle on all this, he's like, you know, as reflection in my life, as I prepare for my judgment, the judgment we're all going to face, and I'm paraphrasing this, he's like, I come to realize that if I don't say something now, I'm going to hell. There's a good chance I'll probably go to hell because of what I was complacent, what I was, you know, and I'm like, so if he's saying that, and if he's saying my eternal life was at jeopardy, at risk, I was on the way to hell because of what I was complacent to. And if I didn't say something and try to get the truth out there, I mean, come on, Catholics, wake up. Then where are you heading to? If you're following these prelates that are okay with anything goes lifestyles and supporting abortion and doing all this stuff, if you're with them, and he said, I was once with them and that's where I was going to be heading, wake up. And that's I mean, I'm sorry, but there's no other way to put it than the truth has finally come out, and it's being politicized and all this by Archbishop Vigano, of course. But we need to take what he's saying and take that into our heart and self-examine, because, you know, if he saw the light and he's able to live his life in hiding and hopefully in acts of penance and, you know, making amends for all the sins that he feels is on his conscience, we need to start doing the same.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter when you come to the truth. The point is that you come to the truth before it's too late.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, and he's almost there. He's not quite an Orthodox Catholic yet, but you can work on that, Father Tom.
I'll send him an invitation. A meet and greet.
But yeah. Right. We've hit time in no time. See, my advice generally, you see, to anyone would be, you know, to read everything, but try to read it dispassionately, try to read it objectively, and try to find the facts. And then when you find a fact, question the fact.
And that's, you know, that's the biggest point, is question. And if you don't get answers from your questions, continue asking those questions until you find people that are willing to give you the honest answers, until you find answers that relate and match up to with what you've presented and what's the objective truth. So many people don't do that. They just read something really quick and they take it for gospel truth, and that's it. But you need to read it objectively and ask those questions.
Yeah.
And not be settled. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's as Bishop Nicholas and I concluded yesterday's show.
Right.
We're going to do an episode on objectivity and emotions and feelings, etc. Because the trouble is right now is the contemporary zeitgeist is that one feels instead of thinks. This is the problem: is that people feel instead of think, and that's that's really something that needs to be addressed generally. Both within the church and outside the church, because this is why, for example, our politics everywhere are so polarized. Because people just refuse to listen and refuse to try to think and reason objectively. I feel this, so I stick with this, and there's no. There's no way of having a reasonable discussion about these things. This is look at the what's happening in universities, both sides of the pond. Freedom of expression. You can't. Universities should be places where all views and all perspectives are heard and studied, and then weighed on the basis of the logic of their arguments or the weight of evidence in their favor. When I went to university, that's still basically how university was, how it worked, and that was the culture of higher education and the environment of it. But today, with all these, safe spaces and all the rest of it, and we can't have people here whose opinions we don't like. Well,
whatever happened to a good old-fashioned debate? Where you had scholars, professors were debating each other, and then you had to get their students together and collect teams, and then they debate, and then you would be able to have a good discourse. And you may not always agree, you may not come in on common grounds, but you respected each other and you presented cases with facts, with objective, and you didn't have these feelings. Well, he said this and it hurt my feelings, so now I got to go color in a coloring book. No, if you don't agree with somebody, you present a case for why you don't agree with somebody. You put your head in a book and you read it, not color on it. You read the information from the scholars. You present
calmly your argument.
Yeah.
You don't shout and scream and stamp and tear things down and set things on fire and steal and loot and cause trouble. If you ask for a discourse, if there isn't a discourse, and you initiate discourse, and part of discourse is listening. You hear the other side, and then you challenge the other side logically, with the arguments. It's that sadly at the moment in many ways seems lost to us, both in our universities and sadly, and of course I think really actually because it's lost in our public sphere. The way that Senate and committees and Parliament behave. Senators and MPs and all that. That has transferred, as it were. That has infiltrated the universities, so that people think that's the way to behave in public, and of course it isn't.
But I mean, even in the way you look at how people in the church talk, and
because people they've been infected by the same thing.
It's a ripple effect, and it's poisoned every aspect of society. But yet here we are, and we're doing our best to try to say that's not the way you want to live your life. It's not going to bring you happiness. It's not going to bring you peace. It's not going to bring you anything except misery and eternal pain. That's what it's going to. That's what
At the end of the day, it's not about me, myself, and I. It's about
God, the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost.
Exactly.
on this
Yes,
Trinity Sunday.
good way to end on Trinity Sunday.
Right.
With that point. Well, bless you all for watching. Thank you, Father Thomas, for your participation.
Of course.
We hope that's been interesting. We hope that wasn't just waffle to the rest of you, but we hope that's, you know, maybe shed some light on what's going on for various people. But yeah, we live in interesting times. And of course, the important thing for all of us as Christians and as Orthodox Catholics is to remain steadfast in the faith, and don't allow ourselves to be digressed or diverted from our ultimate goal. So bless you all for watching, and we will see you soon. Now, tomorrow evening is a new show. I'll just put the thing up here. This is primarily aimed at vocations to the sacred ministry, but other people, of course, may find it interesting. That's tomorrow at 6:15, Old Roman Vocations, and the rest of the week is more of the usual programming. So we've got Episcopus Admiratio, a wandering bishop. We've got I can't remember who my guest is this week. We've got in conversation with returns this week, and of course Friday Night Live. And just while I've got you all here, just let me reiterate again an important point about Friday Night Live. You really, if you can, should strive to watch it live, because I cannot guarantee that the censors will allow the replay to play as it ought. Because let's just say we strive. Hold on. We walk a tightrope, shall we say, between license and copyright. So I can't always guarantee that that the replay will be okay, that the you know, so if you can, watch it live. And this week will be more of, so last week, don't know if you saw it, Father Tom, but we had some funnies, of course, and then we had a review of the Cardinal.
Yeah.
And this week, oh, actually we could do a poll. So your choices are The Mission, In the Shoes of the Fisherman. Yeah, choice of two. So I'll put a thing up. But which review you would like this week? Would you like In the Shoes of the Fisherman or The Mission? Yeah, cool. So one is Anthony Quinn, the other is Jeremy Irons, and I'll leave you to work out which is which. So again, just to sign off,
tough choices.
Thank you for watching. Yeah, bless you all for watching, and we will see you online soon. Take care. God bless.